has been. It's been a little while.
Um,
Been
thanks
a
for
little while.
thanks for doing this.
I thank you for thinking of me, or
Um,
as Ant-Man says in the Avengers movie, thanks for thinking of me.
oh, did you did you bring in a pop culture reference as soon
I
as
did.
man? Look at
Did.
you. Which I mean, I guess that's a good way of describing you. You're don't judge a book by its cover.
That's correct.
Don't yeah, specifically with you because I don't think if people walked up to you and started talking to you and they didn't ask you what you did, they have no clue.
That's okay. Yeah, I could see that. So since you brought it up, I'll just tell a little bit about myself.
Oh,
My,
okay, great.
no, I mean I feel like that's pretty.
Sure, we can start off like that.
Yeah. No, so my current position um, is a school chaplain. I work as a school chaplain at a Christian academy here in Huntsville, Alabama, K-12 academy. So I'm a K-12 chaplain, which means that I provide spiritual care and spiritual programming. That sounds negative, but spiritual programming is just the management of worship services, community service activities, and spiritual development for a range of people. In this case, both faculty, staff, or that includes faculty, staff, and students. So K-12 students, and then the faculty and staff that supports them. So we do weekly worship once every Friday, and depending on what's going on, we may have K-8, so kindergarten to eighth grade chapel, and then a 9 to 12 chapel, ninth to 12th grade chapel, high school chapel,
Mm.
where we can discuss anything from sexual assault and how you can be an advocate for someone who's experienced sexual assault on to like what the Bible says about heaven, right? So we discuss a number of things. And as a result of that, maybe not as a result, I think my personhood really lends itself to that kind of broad range of discussion topics because I was a music major in college. I graduated from college at Norfolk State University, where I met you, and went on to graduate school, got a master's in business, worked as a federal employee or as a contractor for a number of years, federal contractor for the federal government, and then as a federal employee for about maybe 5 years. Went on to seminary and have recently been awarded a commission with the United States Navy to be a Navy chaplain. So an active duty Navy chaplain. So my life has been one of some would say master or a jack of all trades, master of none. I don't like to look at it that way. I feel like that's a more negative approach.
Hmm.
I think my life has been well suited for me pursuing my interests as they have developed. And I think ultimately my something I was aware of even as a young man, but didn't really want to live into. I wanted to be able to answer these deeper questions, help people with the kind of the more difficult things of their life and I thought that teaching would probably be that route. So as I said, I studied music. I didn't say this. I studied music education in undergrad, but then as I have gone on, at different points in my life, I thought that maybe being someone who was well trained and had a better developed sense of a theological understanding would probably suit that help better, right? So wanting to answer these questions myself and then wanting to be able to help other people answer those questions, I pursued ministry. I went back to seminary, obviously, as I said, graduated from seminary in 2016, December 2016. And I've been doing this job since working as a chaplain, school chaplain, and working towards Navy chaplaincy. Actually, I started working towards Navy chaplaincy in 2014, and finally completed all the things I needed to complete. And we'll be doing that if all goes well, nothing changes, in the beginning of May. So
Well, we're at a point of change, so
yeah,
I
yeah,
hope I
yeah,
hope that everything goes in the right direction. We're definitely at
absolutely,
a point of change.
absolutely.
Uh, what what's seminary school like? I don't know if everybody. I don't know. Not everyone. I should stop using that word. I don't know if it's in common discussion. I think there's more discussion about the traditional four-year universities and other forms of education. I don't know if we talk about seminary. I don't know if we talk about seminary in our everyday lives, especially if you're not exposed to someone who has chosen that route.
Sure.
So I don't know if it's a compare contrast, but yeah.
Sure. I'm just gonna adjust this a little bit. I'm sitting a little further back from my chair, but so seminary is like any other specialty graduate program, right? So if you were going to be a dentist or a doctor or a lawyer or a psychologist with any additional training, you go to a graduate school program. So seminary is a lot like that. You have your course load focuses specifically on anything and everything having to do with a theological understanding of the Bible and its historical narrative, right? So, and I said what I mean by historical narrative. So there will be some variance to seminaries depending on what your denominational affiliation is. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, right? So generally speaking, as a Christian seminary, we're going to follow some similar patterns in how we train and the things that we study, right? We're going to study Christian history in the broader perspective, just like any other Christian seminary would. But where we would vary is in our personal practice as a denomination. So Seventh-day Adventist Christians do some things a bit different from other Christian denominations. For example, Baptist, a very popular Christian denomination. So we would learn kind of the history of those varying specifics for our denomination and the history of our denomination as it developed either worldwide and then in our local community being the United States. And then again, you're learning biblical Hebrew. So you're studying the ancient language of Hebrew, you're studying biblical Greek. So you're learning how to translate and interpret these ancient languages. You're learning the context in which the Bible was developed. You're learning the history that feeds into some of the imagery and the different symbols that are used throughout the Bible's narrative. And you're learning to understand what these stories and these experiences meant to the people who wrote them down so that you can accurately interpret their meaning and apply them to a modern day context, right? Obviously, we're not a people who are largely supported by farming and goat herding or shepherding, right? We don't do that country anymore, right? So how do you take these life lessons and spiritual experiences and make them keep them true to the principle and true to what was intended by the author, and then make it so that the people who would, in your present day context, be in your congregation or in a classroom or in a chapel service, and say, hey, this person experienced this, and it meant this in their context. This is the principle that we can take from that experience and apply to our own context. So you learn kind of the science and the art of that. I had a teacher say that theology is both science and art, right? Science in that you're learning the technical aspects of a language and what the symbols of that language mean, what the symbols mean in the symbols as in the pictures that are being painted by the authors, right? That's kind of the science of it. The art is how this applies to you as a person, how this applies to me as a person, how this applies to our modern day context. So it's both an art and a science, like music, if you will.
Sure. So I love the idea of narratives, and I don't necessarily have an idea of the focal point of these podcasts and these interviews, but I recognize the importance thus far has been narratives.
Yeah.
And it's so important for people to get what they want out of other people's stories and their experiences. And it is an art to it, right? Because not everybody hears not everybody interprets the same story the same way, you know? Right. So yeah, I like that you're continuing that educational piece. And I think that can be, maybe that's why we're able to have more fluid conversations, because you've taken the time to further explore not only your faith, but understanding how to interpret that faith to other people or support them. I think there's oftentimes, especially right now, where we're so much at a divide with people who have, I guess, defined spiritual practices or belong to religious organizations. That there's this kind of, there's a divide, and I think I used to be one of those people who probably sat on one end of the table and
Yes,
didn't really know
you
how to
did. You were.
did not know how to feel about people and
Yeah.
their religion. And I think I was very I think I was probably like most like I think when we were having our early conversations, most 20-year-olds kind of I'm pretty firm in what I believe, and because it worked, that thought, the way I feel about religion works for me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then that's that's how it works, right? And it's taken me some time, but I've come around to understand that there are so many similarities in the way I live my life and in the way you live your life. And from our conversations, I think you've actually told me, you're like, man, if you were a Christian, you'd be okay. You'd be a pretty good Christian, man. I'm
All
just
right. So I was gonna say, as you're talking about narrative, right? And as I was listening to you, I understood you to be using narrative in more reference to your personal narrative, right? Not just the narrative from the Bible story. But as you were talking about that, I thought back to our relationship over the course of time that we've known each other, and how our narratives have synced up despite our different belief systems, right? And so, yeah, I remember very vividly conversations early on, especially as I became more and more serious, more and more convicted, I guess I'll use that word, about my personal belief system. And I don't ever feel like there was any tension between us. I feel like you and I have always been able to navigate those differences with respect and love. But to hear you now, right, based on our conversations earlier, in our relationship, does seem very much like, no, yeah, no. Jojo, as I call you affectionately, Jojo has always, in my mind, I've always understood you to be a principled person who maybe didn't agree with the picture of God that you were shown,
Sure.
And that you've experienced through relationships with other people, but that you appreciated and even I would say respected the principles that you at least hoped that this God held as true and valuable, right? So, and I think, just to kind of bring it back to the idea of narrative from the biblical perspective. So the Bible affirms that in the New Testament. One of the authors talks about the stories of the Old Testament. This is in the book of Hebrews, being written, being captured in the scriptures for our own edification, right? So he literally says the narratives of these people's lives, hundreds of lives over thousands of years, have been captured in this book, because in their lives there are things that we can learn about the God who we serve, the God who created us, and about each other, kind of in this broader context that ties us more closely together than it does separate us, right? So I think, necessarily, to speak to what you brought up about divide, I think necessarily religion does create divide, and I don't think that that's bad in and of itself. I do think that we tend to focus on those differences in a way that is unhealthy. I think if we are looking for conversation to understand, and that's not necessarily to say that once you understand that you're going to agree. I don't think that's true either. But I think if you're looking to understand, at least you know that you actually disagree.
Right.
I don't know that people are truly convicted that they disagree at this point that we are in our nation's history. Like, do you really disagree? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that you truly understand one another well enough to say I disagree. Right. So anyway, that's
a good friend of mine who went to Berkeley. Her name is Alyssa. believe got her PhD in theology.
Okay.
Um, really, really cool and intelligent person. Framed her PhD program um, by saying, once I realized that I was curious and that anytime I enter a conversation, it comes from a place of curiosity. That is what helped. It's just, that was my PhD program.
Yeah.
And almost to a certain degree, putting aside what I've learned,
Mm-hmm.
understanding that I do have some knowledge, but anytime I'm entering a conversation about something I may know or I may not know a ton about, I come in with kind of psyching myself out, like, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
I'm curious. And that helped me. That helped me a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that's really helped me in understanding how spirituality and how people's faith gets them through situations that we're in right now.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the driving forces of having this conversation with you, because we're at a unique and scary time, and it's reflectionary, but it could also be, it could be whatever you want it to be, right? We have to acknowledge that there are some people that are in really bad shape right now, right? And there's some other people who have who maybe have a similar set of circumstances, but are a little bit more resilient. And that could be based off of their faith, their spiritual practices. And so we should be applauding that, right? We should be encouraging people in whatever healthy way you can take care of yourself. Do it. Again, who am I to tell you what works for you? It's not hurting anybody. I might not necessarily it's not even agree. It has nothing to do with me at the end of the day.
Right.
It's
You
like,
place no value on it one way or other.
yeah.
Part of it. Yeah.
Like, I appreciate somebody, like you said before, as a principled person. I really do appreciate when somebody has kind of a framework in which they like maneuver through life. And I hope that as we're reflecting on our time, I hope everyone has the opportunity to reflect. And I think regardless of your situation, there's got to be some moments of reflection as to, like, wow, how do I fit into this puzzle? Right? What's going on with me? How am I going to get through this? What's going to happen after? Where do you see, like, how have you been dealing with this? I think that's, I mean, I could ask you, give people tips on how to use your spirituality in this dire time. But where is your faith come in and your spirituality?
I will start with a more personal anecdote, and I'll move to the more general. So, as I remember, as we kind of batted around this idea of having this discussion, sharing with you some of the things I have been through over the last few years, and you're saying, man, wow, I don't feel like this is a coincidence. You being you and having experienced things you've experienced, how has and then you asked me the question, how's your faith supported you in that process, right? So just for the listening audience who don't know the things that we're talking about.
Sure.
So my father passed suddenly in October of 2018. My uncle passed in November of 2018, and my mother passed in February of 2019. I've just recently had a niece, about a week ago. Niece passed away suddenly and tragically. So add to that just kind of the broader stress of the chaos that we're living through, and you have a mixture that is wrought with difficulty, tendency towards sadness and or depression, and just it's difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
one of the things, so I used to say this in theory. I believed it as far as I could without having had this experience. I used to say, because in the New Testament, Jesus talks about this idea of peace. So from the Christian perspective, he says that he gives peace, not as the world gives peace, but his peace is what he leaves with the world, or that he leaves rather with those who are followers of him. And so when you think about the definition of peace as using the distinctions that he makes, the world seems to define peace as a lack of trouble, right? So you are calm and still and steady in the absence of trouble, right? Jesus talks about a peace that abides despite the trouble. That's a biblical term. The idea abides, right? With something that stays with you, a settledness, a calmness that stays with you despite both your internal circumstances and your external circumstances. So that there's, regardless of what's happening with you, there is a place that you can put it all and say, I can rest here, right? Despite what's happening, things may not be good, but I can rest here quietly, find comfort and calm, right? So dealing with all of the emotions that come with losses like those that I have experienced, and people all over the world, right? This is not a story that's just me. My faith has helped me manage that because I understood that there was a place for that, right? You talked about the idea of a framework earlier on. My faith gives me a framework with which I can answer these questions. Why? So trauma and difficulty for all of us immediately causes us to question why. Why did this happen? Did I do something? What does it all mean? It brings these questions into a very fine focus. And from the Christian perspective, it gives us a framework, the framework of good and evil, right? Now, I'd have to, without getting into the kind of theological discussion between of a God who is all powerful and evil, how does that work with a God that's all powerful? I think the scriptures, rightly understood, give us answers to those questions and give us hope for a future to come where evil will no longer be an issue, right? But even before you get to all of that, I think the biggest help for me was to be able to have these things happening to me in my present tense, right? Right now, my father is dead, my mother is dead, my uncle has passed, my niece is dead. Things are unsure with my job, with the economy, with my family. What is the point, right?
Sure.
Being able to answer those questions with the framework that faith gives, or that my faith gives, has given me courage, right? And to use Jesus's promise of peace, has given me peace to kind of walk through it, right? And the answer, I'll just give this. I don't want to get too long with it, but
we got plenty of time. We got plenty of time, man. We are. If there is any moment where we could do this all day long,
that's true.
Right now.
What do you say? Friday said, "It's Friday. You ain't got nothing to do. You ain't got no job. You ain't got no job.
We don't have any jobs. Like nobody's going anywhere. You're fine." Man, be as long-winded as you want. We're here for the long haul.
Oh, that's funny. He said you ain't got no job. No, so the just going back to the idea of narrative, man, the human narrative is very similar in scripture. And I would say broad brushstrokes, but even down to the minutia of loss and pain and trauma, right? The book of Psalms, I think, is a wonderful example, but even without the poetry, there are several stories of people experiencing loss and what that has done to them, right? But in the book of Psalms, the poets who write these various songs and poems, they talk about the trauma of loss, the crippling fear and anxiety of living in an unsure world, where you literally have your neighbor who is your enemy beating down the gates and about to attack your city, right? Like death is imminent for you. Violence is imminent for you. And they live through all of the human emotions. They talk about the desperation and the sadness And like, God, what are you doing, right? And so to have someone, these people who we tend to kind of idealize, make heroes out of, ask these same questions, have these same experiences, and still be able to come out on the other end and say, you know what, God, I trust you. Right? The author of Lamentations says a very similar thing. At the height of his sadness and at the height of his fear and anxiety in chapter 3, he says, this I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope. It is through the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed. So I put my trust in him, right? So he's in the midst of it. He's in the midst of a very traumatic experience. And he's able to cling on to this promise of hope in the person of God and walk through it, right? It doesn't change. The book of Lamentations doesn't end with this kind of restored happy ending narrative. He lives through this trauma. And that's his starting point, right? It doesn't go back to what it was before. He's able to live through it, take stock of what's happened, and even to thrive after it's all over with, because he's able to hold on to that promise in the person of God. So I think that's what faith does for people, right? It gives you a framework to answer the questions. And even if you can't find an answer that's satisfactory for you, it gives you a person onto which you can hold, right? To say, there is someone who has built this world with wisdom that is beyond my understanding. And so I can trust him if I can't trust anyone else. That even though I don't understand what's happening right now, because he is good, because he is loving, because he is perfect in character, right? I can trust that he's using even these bad things, that he's going to make something good out of those things. So.
Yeah. No, when I hear you speak, your faith serves as a form of an anchor, right? And we need those anchors. And that wasn't, we've got to find those things. Now, I recognize that could be really difficult right now if you've never even started to have that conversation about what is my anchor. I mean, what do I hold on to provide some sense of relief? Maybe to try to simplify our current situation.
Yeah.
But I think those are honestly some of the people that I think about. I wouldn't say day to day, but here and there, I do think about people who don't necessarily, or who are just kind of holding on. You know what I mean? Who were just holding on with the circumstances that have been presented to them, and then another set of circumstances. And I guess you would be one of those people. And I guess I'm a little biased because I know you, and I know how rooted you are in your faith. Mm-hmm. So maybe I didn't worry about you as much, and we had conversations where I felt like I got a pretty good pulse, mm-hmm. right? And we have a relationship that's pretty transparent, mm-hmm. about how we're feeling emotionally. And I think from time to time, I think I'm going on like a more personal level here, but like, I think that I recognized and I kind of understood like, oh, he's going to be okay. He's like,
hey, I'm glad you understood it, because there was some things, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna go ahead. We have to throw the whole thing away and start over. We got to throw the whole thing out.
So, and that kind of, that also was in the back of my head, because you got to be crazy to think that your faith wasn't tested at this point, right? And that's not like at some point. I think these are the conversations that probably aren't happening enough, right? It's perfectly okay. Like any. Oh man, I can't think of something right off the top of my head. Maybe I'll come back to it. But it's like the conversation that we know it's there, like the idea is there. It's just we don't want to talk about it, and it's perfectly okay to like be tested in whatever fact, whether it be a relationship, right? You go to a significant other or a family member, whatever it may be, and you're like, I don't know if this is working out. Like, I just want to be clear, like, I'm not sure if it's working out. And I'm being tested right now. And I'm coming to you because, I need to get some more understanding, clarity, whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I appreciate you bringing it up. So I'm going to answer the question, and I think as I'm just listening to you, I'm going to try to answer the question in 3 parts. So as a chaplain, I am a spiritual care provider, right? Think of me as the spiritual nurse who assists the doctor. In this case, the doctor is whatever higher power it is that you align yourself with. Mm. So as a chaplain, your training makes it so that you appreciate each person's individual narrative, to use that word again, and the things that have been anchors for them. Right? And so I think the way that you get through things like this, if you're not someone who has a well-developed sense of some kind of like a Christian perspective or any other kind of dogmatic religious identity, if you don't have that identity worked out already, I think it's unfair to say to those who will listen to this, to say that you're somehow out of luck, right? So the Bible does give some, from a Christian perspective, it does give some pointers, right? It says to search for the Lord while he may be found, right? Because the time of night comes and no one can find him then. And it's a poetic statement. It's kind of this big idea. Before you're in trouble, it's best to develop a relationship with God, right? Because once you're in trouble, as you said, you're kind of a rudderless boat at that point, just kind of looking for something to cast your anchor on. And it's more difficult to manage the difficulty that you're experiencing. But what I have found to be true in my experience, in my training as a chaplain, when I went through CPE training, and in my personal life experience, just generally. So even before I was a person who would have called himself a Christian, because that was a long time coming, I remembered different things that my parents would say. Right? My mother would say this to me all the time as a child. Because I was just a big, I wore my heart on my sleeve, just a big, vulnerable person. So everything was whenever I let myself be vulnerable, I always felt like I got the short end of the stick. Right? So she would say, "And this too shall pass." And this too shall pass. And I just remembered that, especially as I was going through the mourning of my parents. I remembered her words, "And this too shall pass." And not that you get over traumas, right? Because those things, I remember this movie, I can't remember the name of the movie, but Steve Carell's in this movie. He was a devoted husband, and for some reason or another, his marriage doesn't work out. He meets a woman who he is very much in love with, but he's afraid. And so they're having this very intimate conversation, and he finally lets her in. He says to her, when that relationship ended, it left a big hole in my heart. And he says, "I can still feel it when the wind blows." Right? Oh, wow. That's a powerful line, the imagery. Right? I can still feel it when the wind blows. So there will be things that hurt, that have changed you, that you don't necessarily get over. You just learn to live with, but don't necessarily have to cripple you. Right? And I think remembering those anchoring moments in your own personal life, in your own narrative, is the things that you can rely on. Right? This too shall pass, as my mother would say. My father would say, "Hey man, life is hard." That's all he would say. He just hit you with the, no comfort, no nothing. He just hit you in the head with it. "Listen, man, life is hard."
Life's hard.
And he just shake his head. That's his answer.
I mean, I think if you look at older generations,
man, come on.
If you look at older generations, and this is across all religions, races,
culture, yeah. Come on.
It crosses so many lines. If you go to some older folks, they've seen, I mean, there are people who have lived through world wars.
That I've seen some things.
I have seen some things. And yeah, I mean, I joke around, and this is probably like I'll probably continue to joke around because about my mother right now.
Mm.
My mother's an introvert, doesn't really leave the house too much, watches a lot of TV.
She's good.
She's fine. She grew up she grew up poor with not a lot. And she understands the concept of this will pass.
Yeah.
But it'll be like, look, things. Now, this is unique. Let's not, I don't want to overstate. I don't want to overstate Corona. I don't want to piss Corona off. It might come knocking at my door. Like, oh. What'd you say about? Oh, you thought.
What'd you say? Say it to my face.
Don't think. We can't. Yeah. So, yeah. No, this is a little different, and definitely within our time. But yeah, man, I think it's so I've noticed a couple things. So I think this tends to happen in our conversations either way, but it's a great reminder that there's only so much. There's only so much kind of darker emotion that you can have, that feeling of despair before that, like, hold on, let me go back and laugh about something.
Right? Humor, man. You need some levity. You gotta break it up.
Gotta have some form of ease and easiness. And I see it here in San Francisco. I'm constantly reminded of, I'll be walking around the city, going for a walk, and I walk downtown often, and I didn't understand why I liked walking downtown until I sat and thought about it. I was like, why do you always walk downtown? Like, it's just your go-to. And I came to the conclusion that I'm reminded of what is going on in the world when I walk downtown. Drug addiction, homelessness, sex trade. It's right. It's like a reality check.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't ever want to forget what is going on. It almost, because it becomes frustrating sometimes when I see people who, I don't know, I guess are negligent and just like, oh, things are just.
Yeah. I gotta beat it.
I like
my final exam, man. Shut up.
Like, get out of here.
That's how you feel.
Like, are you really?
No.
And so, I mean, I see. Oh man, I mean, and I see humor in the darkest areas. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it could be somebody on drugs having a great time, but I mean, I see people that are down and out, and they're having a ball.
Yeah,
they're having a ball.
Yeah.
And I learned something from them. I like for damn sure. Like during this point in my life, as I'm pursuing my master's degree in social work, when I'm bombarded with stories of abandonment and depression and anxiety and rape and anything else you want to add to the list, I got to go somewhere else. And sometimes I think about those people who are down and out, who are, man, playing music on the corner, having a good time. I'm like, you know what? If they have the ability to, I do as well.
Right. So, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And I want to do like you did. I want to make sure that people understand I'm not making light of whatever. So if you fail a test or you got a C or you got a B, like that's important to you. So, right, I'm not making light of that.
Right.
What I do appreciate about what you said is that there's perspective. So I think the point that we can make, one of the things that anyone can do to manage their strain and stress, sadness in times like these, is to find perspective, right? No matter what it is, because a test is really important. I remember times where tests were really important to me as an undergraduate student. It wouldn't be as important to me now as a 30-something-year-old person, right? Like, okay, I failed that one test. It's not the end of the world, right? What can I do better to move past it, do better on the next test? But as a 18, 19-year-old, that was stressful, like really stressful, legitimately stressful. But in the light of the loss of parents, in light of maybe you got to figure out what bill you're gonna pay and not this month.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Right. So I think finding perspective in whatever your situation is always helpful. And I agree with you, man. Levity is a great. I mean, that's a proverbial statement from the Bible, right? It says laughter does the heart good like medicine, right?
Yeah.
Man, you gotta find a place. Gotta find a place to laugh.
So you beat me to the punch. I was gonna say. So when you're in seminary, are there, like, I would assume, like in any other academic arena, that there are people who are just far too serious, right? Yeah. And off the top of my head, I'm like, seminary? Oh, there's probably some like
very serious
people.
What? Huh? Salvation? Gonna be lost? No. And it's like, oh my God.
Okay, take it easy.
I just wanted to know how many chapters in this book. I don't know.
Okay. So did you find that kind of comedic outlet, or were you the comedic outlet?
Dude, seminary is full of comedians.
I could imagine.
So we have our own building. The seminary I went to, we had our own building on an undergraduate campus.
Okay.
So you go to this one building for all your classes, and in that building we had a common area, and you should see us cut up like between classes towards midterm, final time. Like we would come out, kind of sit around, mill around, and everybody has their group, right? You have your people who you kind of let your guard down with, and you let in when the things happening with you. And we're just all sitting around, man, making jokes and just talking crazy, having a good time. And you just never, I don't know that we were ever consciously thinking about what that was doing for us to get us through the strain of being away from family, right? Because a lot of the people in seminary are older. They're married with children in many cases, and they're not always able to go to seminary with their families. In my case, my wife was in one place. She's working 2 and 3 jobs. I'm in school. So we're not living together, right? That's stressful.
Yeah.
You miss the people who have traditionally been your anchors and all that kind of stuff. So we're just encouraging each other with laughter and jokes and making light of the stuff that we got going on. And it was enough, right? It was enough to get you from one place, this one difficult square, over to this next one where you needed another refill. Right? It's just like a pit stop at the gas station. You got filled up, you ran on that gas for a little bit, and then you got to get filled up again. So yeah, man, I absolutely, I agree. Man. Our conversations when I was going through things kind of earlier on in that process for me always brought me laughter. I remember this summer driving. So I'm doing a number of things. My wife is moving back from Pennsylvania because she was in school. She went to the War College, so we're moving her back to Alabama. I'm dealing with my parents' estate. So that's stressful because I just want to get it over with. And all of the things that kind of come with the family tension of having lost your parents, dealing with all of that. Trying to figure out what I want to do with my career because I'm still kind of in between, at that time, going active duty in the Navy, staying in my current job, becoming a reservist in the Navy. So I'm weighing all that kind of stuff. And I literally feel like I'm being crushed by all the pressure and the uncertainty that I'm dealing with. And when I'm driving down the road here in Huntsville, and I'm screaming at the top of my lungs as I hold the steering wheel because I'm so frustrated. And I'm not talking to anyone in particular. I'm just screaming my frustrations out. And you and I got on the phone right after that, a shouting match in the car. And I cracked up. It wasn't a long conversation, but I remember how much better I felt, the relief I felt, being able to kind of talk to somebody and let's make jokes how we do. And just what that did for me to kind of bring me back, give me perspective in that moment, to ground me again so I can get back to what needed to be done. So man, perspective, laughter, man, those things really are valuable because your feelings always make things feel so much bigger than what they are, even if they're huge, right? Even if in reality those things are huge, your feelings will make them so much bigger. And that weight man, we're all crushed under it. We're all
Yeah.
crushed under it.
So,
Perspective and laughter give you a way to counter that. So,
do you think that it's just perspective, or could we dive a little deeper and say it's diversity of perspective? Or is that
yeah, I think that is a better way to describe it, right? Because my perspective was a valid perspective.
yeah?
Having a change perspective, a different, more diverse perspective, also that helped. Yeah, no, you're right.
And so, what? How do you do that? What's a how do you do it? Because it sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
I think that comes a little bit easier for you and I, but I think that could be difficult
It was.
to to look for that, and that takes time.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah.
despite how I may be showing up to, like in this video for other people, uh, I think of myself more as an introvert than not.
Hmm. I mean, we're all introverts at times, right? I mean, at some
That's
point.
right. That's right. I was going to say, because in my pain, I did not want to be bothered. I was not available to anyone. I don't want to talk about anything. I don't want to make no jokes. Right?
Leave me alone.
Leave me alone. I want to come home. I want to watch some TV.
Yeah.
Nothing too deep. I don't know. I just want to.
No, nothing too deep. Don't take me there.
I don't want no deep feelings. Some action movies, something that gets blown up. That's good. Let's watch some blown up stuff. Some light jokes. Those are also fine. I'm not talking Driving Miss Daisy. I'm not talking Steel Magnolias. Nothing like that. We're not watching.
No.
We're not doing Fences. No, I can't do no Fences. Street Could Talk. Can't watch that. Can't watch that. Street Could Talk. Man, I can't do it right now. American History X. Can't watch that either. Can't do that. Can't do that.
Well, have you noticed? I don't know if you've. I don't know if you noticed, but have you been watching TV like a good amount, or have you looked on cable television recently?
I've avoided. So I've watched things that are known quantities to me. Other than that, I block the rest of it out.
So I went to go check up on my mom, and I went to go watch TV in a separate part of the house. And like I said before, she's a TV junkie, right? She loves TV. So I'm just kind of like looking through the channels. I don't really watch a ton of TV, and so I really don't know what to watch.
Mm.
But I was like, yeah, let me scroll through. And it's hard to believe there's not an agenda out. I think in 4 channels, it was like world's largest tidal wave, Armageddon, Deep Impact, zombie apocalypse. You know what I mean? It was just like back to back to back. Wait, really? Yeah. That's what we're doing? Yeah. We need to put those on right now.
Probably not a good idea, right? It's the news. It's something else.
It's like we know you don't necessarily want it, but if we put it out there for you, you'll probably bite.
Yeah.
You'll probably bite. I mean, I'm glad that there have been. I'm glad there have been other folks, and I think social media has played a good role in this. I haven't gotten to the point where I'm abusing social media. I almost did. I almost had a day where I was on my phone and just looking, which is normal. I think especially right now as we try to like get into the routine. But in the beginning of that, like in the beginning of the day, I was like, oh man, great. I'm seeing positivity. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm like, good, man. People taking care of each other, kind words, thoughtfulness. Okay, yep. Even though it's done digitally and like, it's whatever. It's not what I'm necessarily used to. I appreciate it. And I hope that energy is being spread around. Mm-hmm. Now, as I continued throughout the day, I got to get I got annoyed because then it started to turn into what I don't like about social media. It's people taking tons of selfies. There's look at what I'm doing. Look, I'm doing okay. What's going on with me?
Yeah.
And in one sense, I'm like, okay, well, this is getting you through it. Okay.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I did see. I wanted to make note that I have seen some really um, cool, cool things and people, DJs, um, yoga instructors, dance teachers, trying to establish a community while we are social distancing. Even though I don't know if all of us are, there's such. I mean, you can try. I've been listening to other podcasts that I enjoy, and they've brought up things that I've been thinking. Like I went on a walk in the park today, and there's someone that works on behalf of the Parks and Rec Department of San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, I was like, well, I wonder what she's doing. She's just standing there and doesn't really seem like there's much to do.
Yeah.
Whatever, there's not that many people, but there's folks getting exercise in. And I have my headphones on and I see this guy approaching her. And he hasn't gotten too close to her yet, but he's speaking to her. And just from like it seems like it's their first interaction. They never met before or nothing. And then he's getting closer. I'm like, what the hell what's he doing? And I think he was asking her, I think he had just left the bathroom and he was asking, do you have any hand sanitizer? Mm-hmm. Now, I'm thinking like, oh yeah, I guess clean your hands, but that would totally defeat the purpose of distancing yourself. Right? It's like, well, I need to get really close to you in order to get hand sanitizer. Right? So I was like, okay. And then I think about,
want to get a phone number. I don't know.
Hey, if there's a time where you want to have a real moment with someone.
Listen, we are together. I don't want to be alone anymore.
I just don't want to be alone anymore. I saw you here in your bright neon orange and.
Girl, I just need to talk to you.
I just need to talk to you.
I don't talk to you. No, man. I hear you, dude. I think so. One of the things I've thought about, a lot of things came to mind when I was going through kind of the heavier moments of my morning. I was seeing a therapist, and she would remind me constantly. She said, "You only have so much energy to do anything in any given day." Mm-hmm. Right. And right now, the majority of your energy is being used to deal with your grief. Mm. Right. So you can only do what you can do. So I think recognizing your limitations in moments like these is healthy for you. Mm. Casey Gerald, he wrote this wonderful article last year, The Great Black Art of Escape, where he talks about being someone with a voice and influence and the intellect to speak to the larger issues of the Black community. And he wrote this article on the anniversary of the 400 years since the first slave came to Virginia. So he talks about, from his perspective, being dumped on, and I hope I'm being fair to what his article spoke to, but being dumped on by all of these people who he valued in his community when they are expecting him, requiring of him that he speak up, that he take certain positions, that he be more vocal, that he use his position to speak to the ills in the community or in our society that affect African American people and the poor and disenfranchised in general, right? But more specifically, African American people. And his response, because of all of the things that he was dealing with as a person, was to say no, right? He escaped. That's the kind of the big idea behind the title. He went and just took care of himself. He went through therapy. He took time to just kind of sit and be quiet and process through his feelings and deal with his own baggage, because he was not in a space to deal with anything else. Right? So I think knowing your limitations, knowing when you need to escape. Escape is not a bad thing as long as you do it in a way that is healthy. Right? I'm not talking about abusing the use of drugs and alcohol. I'm not talking about escaping into irresponsible and reckless sex. I'm not talking about escaping into overeating, trying to eat your feelings. I'm talking about really sitting down and taking the time in your escape to focus on, deal with, pay attention to the things that are happening for you. Right? So in moments like this where you have to socially isolate, where you can't really be around people like that, this is actually a great time to sit with your thoughts and process through them. Dave Chappelle tells this great joke. He receives a letter from a transsexual person, and he doesn't realize the person is transgender, um, uh, until he gets to the end of the letter, and when they reveal to him that they're transgender. And he says he did something in that moment that not a lot of Black people have the money or the time to do. He says, I thought about how I felt.
Mm-hmm.
None, like you said earlier, we don't have anywhere to go. We don't have anything to do. For the most part, I mean, even if you have worries piling up, bills piling up, things, I mean, there's nothing you can do about that right now.
No.
You can't go anywhere. You're not working. Like, process through what you're feeling. Do the work, because right? You'll be better for it. And it's tough. It is tough, especially if you haven't spent time doing that with any regularity. It'll be very difficult. It'll get worse before it gets better. But sitting there with your feelings and processing through them, journaling is something I did a lot of in my morning. That helped me a great deal. You got to sit with it. The only way out of these dark moments is through them. You got to go through them.
Do you think that happens kind of naturally? Do you think that like sitting with your thoughts, there's got to be a ton of introspection happening right now?
I'd like to think so.
There's got to be. And the more that I overhear analysts and skeptics talk about the economy, and the president mentioned it before at one point about trying to get people out of quarantine sooner than later. Yeah, the more I couldn't help but think, maybe this is part of my introspection. I'm like, wait, don't you see that a lot of our systems are not working right now? And that are getting people back up. What are you getting people back up to do? Is it just to work? Is it just to get them back in that gig? Well, yeah, okay, obviously we all need money in order to survive. But are we asking, maybe this is fairy tale thinking, what if somebody came out, leadership, not necessarily the president, but someone who could speak to, who appeals to the world or to the country, whatever it may be. And maybe that's our role on a local level. Maybe that's where these conversations are necessary. Hey, I encourage everyone to think about what's important to you. Mm-hmm. I know we're in difficult times, but did you need to buy the $50,000 car? Is the $50,000 car important to you? If it's important to you, sure, okay. Is competing with someone about how much money they have, how the clothes that they own, the lifestyle that they're living, is that what's important? Right? Yeah, man. I think I might have gone a little left, but
I don't know, man. I was gonna say. So I think that's a great segue back to kind of the faith question, right? And the framework of faith as I possess personally, trauma like this, challenges like this, struggle like this, is something that God uses to give perspective, right? It's like it's a last ditch effort, right? In the book of Lamentations, again, it says that God does not afflict men willingly, right? So when God allows traumas like these things to happen, it's not something he does with any great joy or happiness or willingness. Like If you think of God as the perfect loving parent, and then think of your parents in their best moments when they had to discipline you. I don't think any parent who's in good health, mentally and emotionally, would say that they enjoyed disciplining their child, right? My parents used to say it to me all the time: this is going to be harder for me than it is for you. And I didn't understand that until I had to discipline a child that I love deeply.
Mm.
It's very difficult to afflict them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what it does for them is it gives them perspective. You're never more clear than after you've come off punishment or after you have had a whooping, right? You're never more clear than after you've had some difficult moment in your life that you kind of saw coming down the road, but you weren't willing to change your behavior before you got there. And in those moments of clarity, you make sound decisions to do something different. So absolutely, man, I think moments like these are great times to reflect personally about what's really important and then start moving your life in that direction. Right? And I think faith aids in that because it helps you get at those questions more quickly, right? And with, I'd like to think, more meaning.
So your kids, not
Yeah.
your kids you teach.
Yeah.
This has got to be. I coach kids, and I've talked about supporting the kids that I coach during this time. But you've got a unique one as a chaplain, and again on top of what life has presented you with, right? It's got to be kind of a weird time to then. So the school you teach, is it a Seventh-day Adventist school?
It is. Yeah.
It is. This has got to be. I mean, I guess you could look at it in a couple different ways, right? You could look at it as there are kids whose faiths are being tested right now, early in life. There could be some kids who legitimately are like, man, I'm done with this. I'm done. I'm seeing some things at home. I'm seeing some things in the world that are just turning me away. Regardless of the fact, they're still coming to you for guidance. And I guess one hats off to you for doing the work, because that's a tall order. This is a very tall order. So you're a kid right now. I don't want to ask, oh, what are your kids going through? You're a kid. What are you going through right now? What the hell is possibly going on in your head?
I mean, you think about the things that children deal with, young adults deal with, relationships, personal value.
Yeah.
What you gonna do with your life? Maybe you've taken on the stress of the difficulty in your parents' marriage, or lack thereof. Right? You are dealing with your own stresses, drug abuse, maybe, or drug use, maybe not even abuse, drug use, alcohol use, sex, all that kind of stuff. And then, oh, by the way,
Man, I think we got a little frozen here for a second. Hold on one second. I think we have got some technical difficulties going on here. Hold on one second. I think I might. Maybe it's on me. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Oh, great. Man, move your computer over a little bit. And
good to go.
Shout out to all the IT people. I sent this Instagram, shared an Instagram post like, thank you all the farm workers and the social workers and the food distributors, first responders. And I totally, after I sent it, I thought I was like, all right, I was pretty inclusive, I didn't want to leave anybody out. And then I totally forgot. I was like, man, all those fools upkeeping all the internet lines and the phone line. I'm like, man, I'd say, hey, I would be having a real rough time right now. I'd be having a real rough time without the internet.
I appreciate you. I love you. Thank you.
But I'm sorry, before we were talking about kind of the situations that youth might be trying to navigate right now. And what do you think, what can we, I think I like young people. I really do. I think there's a lot of things we can learn from them. I think we get so far into our adulthood and we change. And there's something about adolescence and youth and energy. And we talked about curiosity before. That's what I'm most impressed about younger folks. That sense of curiosity and that, from what I remember, the willingness to fail. Now, right now, I think that there's some youth struggle with that in their lives, that willingness to fail. I think failure can be really daunting for them because everyone can see it now that, we have access to everyone and their mother. So yeah, what do you think? What do you think we could? What do you think we can learn as adults, or just people? What can people learn from the youth?
I think, man, the youth are huge supporters of each other.
Yeah.
So that's what I was going to say before. One of the things I've learned as a chaplain is to not try to make people feel better, but just to be there with them. I call it being big enough to be small enough, right? This is not about me and my discomfort with whatever you're feeling or going through, or my inability to express to you, that it's going to be okay in a way that you can understand, or to say the right things. Because you watch TV and it always seems like every moment, because it's scripted, the person says the exact right. Oh man, that was perfect. Like, I need to confess my love to somebody. I say it like that. No, man. I think just being with someone in trouble is the blessing. Right? Just be with them. That is the thing that we can learn. And maybe we can't be there physically because of all the restrictions, the well-founded practice of social distancing. But a FaceTime conversation, phone conversation, text messages, right? Just be with each other to the degree that it's possible. Because one of the biggest things that, even if you can't believe it right now, depending on what you're going through, is that you're really not alone. You're not. It might feel like that, but you are not. Your feelings and what is true are not the same.
Oh, this is
valid because of your feelings, but they're not necessarily true. Right?
This is a prime example of us being so connected. Mm-hmm. This is a prime example, and I talked about it earlier about people, being kind to each other, and it's there, and we're all going through it across the world. Across the world, we are all struggling with this, right? And so in the same sense, sit with those feelings and understand. I guess that's more, it goes back to introspection and be like, oh wait, am I going through this by myself? No. Mm-hmm. There are millions and millions of people going through this same issue. They're having the same conversation with themselves or with a friend or family member, whatever it may be. Yeah.
But I definitely think there's a benefit in having that conversation with another person, right? A tangible friend or family member, like somebody that you love and trust, and you can be vulnerable with, and you can say things however they come out with, and that's what you needed. Right? Being able to talk plain, speak plainly. Yeah. It says in the New Testament, it says of Jesus with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, that he talked plainly, he spoke plainly with them. Think about the pressure that Jesus, as if whether or not you ascribe him to be the Son of God or you accept that as a fact, the text speaks of him like that way, and he sees himself that way. So even if you don't believe it, that's how he saw himself. So if you think of the pressure that would put on somebody, right, to have to live into that and be there for so many people and help them in the ways he needs to help them, and then to be able to go to his friend's house and speak plainly to them.
Yeah.
Just keep it real, keep it all the way funky. These are my friends, and I can talk to them.
I'm just going over to talk to my homeboy over here.
Yeah.
I just want to see what's going on.
You just want to kick it with the homies. What's cracking? Who got the Kool-Aid? You understand me? What's going on? Who got?
I know y'all got something to drink. I'm thirsty.
I know you got that country time on ice, buddy. So there's a blessing in that, man. There's a blessing to be able to talk to somebody and really just have a conversation. And I think being able to talk with people, and like I said, even if you don't have the words to help them feel better, don't try it. Just listen. Just listen.
Let me talk about that in our program, in the importance of silence when you're around other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I've tried to become better at podcasting, and just in my research, I listened to Larry King.
Mm-hmm.
Because Larry King is the pioneer of interviewing, right? He's everybody knows Larry King. Well, not everybody, but
yeah, most people.
Most folks do, unless I don't know. Maybe if you're, I don't know, 20, 25 and below, you probably don't know who Larry King is, unless your parents, whoever you grew up around, that's Larry King.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
First of all, what you're not going to do is disrespect the OG.
What you're not going to do is disrespect Larry the King.
That's Larry the King right there. Understand
it. But he had I listened to an interview, and he said once, what was the key to his success? He was like, listening. You don't learn anything when you're talking, right? And I try to incorporate that not only into my everyday life, but specifically here. It's not about me trying to talk over whoever I'm just having a conversation with. It's legit. Like, I want you to talk so I can listen. Like, I really want to learn. I'm curious as to what you have to say.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing goes when I was talking about, some of the therapeutic practices that we're learning about in my program. Sometimes sitting with another person and just sitting with them is enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always about trying to push and trying to get more information and more of it. Well, how can I help and what can I do? This is yours.
Okay.
This is your time. We can sit here. We can sit here. We can legitimately sit here for 30 minutes if that is going to help you. Mm-hmm. Right? And sometimes that's what we need. Haven't there been, there've got to be multiple times where you've just been in you don't want to talk. You just want to be around somebody. You just want to share that energy, share their space. It's funny how that connection works. It's funny how that connection works. It might not, in some cases, it might not be the first person on your list. It's like, if somebody's around, I'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be all right. Yeah, it's good. Right now, let's make do with what we have.
That's
right. So, what have you been doing? What have you been doing recently? I mean, aside from taking on a lot from your students, because I'm sure that in one sense they're probably like, cool, no school, because you guys aren't in school, right? School's
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So in one sense, I'm trying to put myself back in the shoes of a student. I'm like, all right, word, no school. But then I'm assuming that you have do you have online classes?
We do.
Okay. And what's that? Yeah, what's that like for you as a teacher?
Man, so I miss my kids, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So whenever we'll have video conferences, we don't do it every school day. We'll do it. My goal is to do it with them once a week. So we'll have video conferences, and I just talk. We just talk, right? And we're just checking in. We do work, or where I give instruction, clarification on an assignment that I've already given, something like that. But my primary goal always is really just to stay connected with them and have them know that I'm still here for them, and let them spend some time with each other, right, outside of the normal context of class. Because one of the beautiful benefits of a physical classroom is that they have that social interaction. So before I take attendance, when they come into the classroom, there's normally a few minutes where I'm getting something together to present to them for class, or pass something out, pass something back. And so they have, 3 or 5 minutes where they're sitting there kind of talking and catching up and just trading stories or whatever. And that's part of the benefit of being in class together. So I give them some of that time when we have class together, right? Like the dynamic of all of us being in the room, air quotes, together, and allowing us to just spend some time building relationship. So what I have done, just kind of personally for self-care, is because I've found that because I'm working from home, I'm not working fixed hours like I typically would. So when you're at work, and then you leave and you go home, right? But if you're at home, it's all kind of blending together. So I am trying to be more intentional about setting those boundaries around work time and personal time.
Yep.
But when I do have personal time, I just kind of sit, man, with my wife and my family, my mother-in-law, my niece. We sit around, we talk, we laugh, we watch movies. My wife and I will be making jokes. I'll walk through the house. We have a lot of inside jokes. So I walk through the house screaming those inside jokes at people.
Oh.
Which I enjoy thoroughly. I don't know.
Well, I'm happy that you enjoy it.
Yeah, I enjoy it thoroughly. I really do. I remember when we first all started to live, when we first started living together, they would be like, "Why are you so loud?" I don't think I'm loud. I think I'm just enjoying being in you guys' presence.
Oh, you tried to reframe it. It's just not, I'm not loud. I'm just excited to see y'all.
You got to spin it. No, I was a little loud.
I might have been a little loud.
I'm not quite as loud now, but every now and again you got to bust it out. You got to get loud.
It looks like you got a haircut.
No, I haven't had a haircut in probably 3 weeks.
Yeah, you see what I was trying to do there. I was like, well, you have you?
So you went to a non-essential.
So you went to a non-essential. Wait, so what's non-essential? I
don't think barbershops are essential.
So here in San Francisco, restaurants are still restaurants.
You still go to Carrot.
So, I was walking. I mean, there's a lot of restaurants that are closed, right? And sadly enough, that some of those restaurants might not be opening back up.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's a reality. Oddly enough, I was in the Castro district in San Francisco. I was taking a walk with my brother-in-law, and this cookie spot is open. All they sell is cookies. And I didn't pay any mind. I was like, well, I haven't had a cookie in a while, so I guess I'll go get a cookie. Right?
Gotcha.
Boom! So don't pay it any mind. My brother-in-law calls me the next day like, hey, did you notice that you bought a cookie yesterday? I was like, yeah, wow, what's up? He's like, you think that's an essential business? To someone who really wants a cookie? Sure, yeah, I guess so. I mean,
yeah.
I
was going to say the same thing about getting a haircut, right? Like in our culture, haircuts is pretty important.
Oh, is it? Oh my God, is it like beauty and like self-care. Well, I mean, there's a different. I mean, I guess beauty and self-care are kind of one and the same.
They can fold into each other.
Yeah, but I think it's fascinating. I mean, I've just, I've been looking at more. I think this has been. I mean, I've shaved, but clearly I haven't gotten
Clearly.
a haircut. And it's interesting how, in one sense, I thought about this earlier. In one sense, there are people who are still following like their everyday routines, which is good, right? They're like, oh, okay, let me put my makeup on and let me get dressed and like I'm going somewhere. I'm not going anywhere, but let
Right.
me get dressed like I am.
That's right.
And so it's so fascinating because in one sense, now you speak about beauty specifically in the Black community. It's really weird that there are beauty supply stores that have not closed.
Okay. Hey man, listen. Women need their bundles.
And
Brothers need their do-rags and they hard crystal brushes. You
it
understand?
is fascinating.
Pomade. You understand?
Yeah, like it's a part of, I guess, your ritual. But yeah, I've had conversations where people are like, I mean, yeah, this is. I had a friend of mine who stays in contact with her hairdresser, knowing she's not going to see her, but she just acts like, oh yeah, like I just, what's going on? Like, let's just keep this going. I'm not gonna lie, I did that with my barber. I wanted to,
I was literally gonna text him today. Like, what's up, bro?
how you doing? How's everything going?
Yeah, how you doing, man?
Just checking in on you, making sure if there was a slight chance that,
If
hey.
a brother can get a cut, I'm just saying. I ain't trying to risk it.
I'm
But
not
if you
trying
can, I don't know.
but if you know what I mean? So yeah, that's like an interesting one where people are spending their time kind of like getting themselves together. And I was trying to think, I was like, is there any other like creature that does it? But I was thinking, I was like, if you look at nature, there's always going to be a form of like beautifying. It's just it's in the process, right? Like I got to make sure like my fur looks good, or like my nails can't be too long because like there's examples everywhere,
Yeah.
right? And so it took me a second because I'm looking at people. I think I've more so women on online. I've had interviews with women, and they got the full get up, the full situation. I'm like, oh, okay, all
Amazing.
right. We are in the quarantine in style. Don't you think for a second?
That's right.
Yeah.
I saw a video today. I forget where I saw it. A Black Greek letter organization, sorority.
Okay.
And the young women, I don't know if they're line sisters or just all from the same chapter, but they're all from the same organization. They have a makeup brush. They cover the camera with the makeup brush. So before they cover the camera, they look like their regular self. Like you just at home, you got your hair tied up, you got your glasses on, you just kind of kicking it, right? But after they uncover the camera with the makeup brush, I mean, they glammed up. Got the dress on, got the makeup done, your face beat to the gods, hair done. I mean, you out here, eyelashes, lip gloss, everything, just like you about to go to the club, but you at the club of your house.
Club your house.
Club of your house, but you're looking amazing. You understand?
You look great.
So I mean, I think that there's something to be said about. I mean, when you look good, you feel good, right? So I think there's something to be said about that, maintaining that practice, because it does help you maintain a sense of normalcy. It does help you maintain a sense of self-confidence and self-assurance. And if you're in a funk, I mean, there's no better way to get out of a funk than to, especially if it's something that you can't do anything about, to do something about things you can do something about. Right? You can dress up, you can take a shower, do something about the thing you can't control. So
yeah, maybe that's for another. That's another podcast. I had a. So I was in this. I was in this class where we're talking. It's called DSM, but we're talking about clinical disorders.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember if we were talking about bipolar and schizophrenic folks, or folks who suffer from bipolar and schizophrenia disorder. But a friend of mine sitting there. Yeah, sometimes he's well, no, he's the only white heterosexual male in our social work program, and sometimes he has these comments or jokes which I think are hilarious,
Mhm.
because I think he sometimes forgets, which I like. I like that he forgets, like, kind of his identity in the room. Majority, I would say, majority women, majority Latin women.
Mhm.
But he said something. I think our professor said something around, yeah, something that's common when we see this, and like women who like put on a lot of makeup, and you can tell that they just put tons and tons on, and like it doesn't look, it doesn't look good.
Mhm.
And he said, "Yeah, I used to be a firefighter. When we would take people into the hospital, yeah, I would look in, and I would have a hard time noticing who worked there and who was a patient."
Oh, man.
I said, "Oh man," but that's another conversation. That's a whole different. That's a whole. I just looked at him like, "You are funny.
You
You're a funny guy, man." I
took
don't.
a risk right there. You took a risk.
He took a risk. You threw it out there. He has his moments, and I know some of the other women in the class looking at him like, "Who are you?
What?
Like, what are you talking about?"
Then you start telling the stories like, this doesn't seem like it's going to end well.
This doesn't.
Oh,
It's
shit.
it's okay.
Yeah.
Well, we could keep going on and on. I always say this at the end, like everybody who I talk to on this, I'm like, we keep going on and on. Like I could do this for hours. But I know people's attention spans. Yeah, they can handle it, but I feel like this is a good time to part ways.
Okay.
Unless you got something else, you got anything?
I guess I would just close by saying, man, for people to remember their humanity,
Mm-hmm.
their needs, and the needs and humanity of their neighbor. In times like this, the easiest thing is to set the guard up and try to protect yourself. I think the more beautiful thing, the divine thing, is to continue to be vulnerable and to be there for each other in whatever way it's possible to be there for each other. So I would just encourage people to continue doing that, because that's how we get through this. If the only way out of this moment is through it, that's how we get through it. That's how we all get through it in a way that is healthy and keeps us whole.
I think if you were in a church setting or somewhere else, I think somebody would respond to you by saying "Amen." Isn't that usually what people say? That is an accurate statement. Oh my God! I think just at the at the conclusion, my Wi-Fi. I don't know what's going on with my Wi-Fi today, but either way, kind of going in and out. Well, cool, dude. We'll do this again. And
Yes, sir.
appreciate your time.
Thank you, man.
Even though you have a lot of it, I still appreciate it.
That's cool. I appreciate you appreciating it.
Yeah, I appreciate you appreciating it. All right, cool, man.